Hello, and welcome to the House of War. Today on Breaking Chains, we are dealing with books, my favorite subject and my number one vice. Books are probably the thing that I can't resist. When Phil and I lived in Manila, years ago, Manila, Philippines, we would go to the bookstore for our date. And we learned that we couldn't go there because we would talk each other into buying books. We would say, it's an investment. And we would walk out of there having spent $50 when we were living on $1,000 a month. And so we had to stop going to the bookstore. And if you were in our home and had ever been there, you would know that people tease us that our house looks like a library. I'm the kind of person that walks into a bookstore or a library and I just wish that somehow all of that stuff would just be in my head magically. If I could just sort of go and let it all come into my head. You know, Thomas Jefferson said to John Adams in 1815, I cannot live without books. And that's how I feel. A room without books is like a body without a soul. And somebody once said that a well-read woman is a dangerous creature. I don't know about that, but we are doing a special this time for you on books. As we break chains, one of the ways to break the chains of ignorance and exploitation and the isms in our lives and in our circles is to learn and understand things that we're unfamiliar with. And what better way to do that than reading stories from other people's lives, real stories. So we're going to feature some special items that are discontinued, and only maybe we have 2 or 3 of them left. And so I'm going to talk to you about a bookmark, because we actually, this will save your place in your book when you get called to make dinner or have to answer that phone in a hurry. These bookmarks were made in Michigan. We only have 23 of them left. It's a safe house in Michigan that we partnered with, and they rescue children, and they have a school right on the property. And when I was there, it's an incredible program where they have solar and they have animal husbandry. And I was sitting having lunch with the rescued girls, and one of them told me that she wished she could have 34 sheep. And I said, well, I can't afford 34, but what's 3 plus 4? She said 7. So we said, okay, we'll buy you 7 sheep. And then we discovered that we had to buy them a ram. I want to talk to you about the books on this table. And I want to explain to you why we carry the books we carry and who would buy these books. Who are we recommending these books for? And so I'm going to just take a minute or two on each book. And you know, some of them we won't continue to carry them, so once we're out of them, they're gone. So I'm going to deal with the ones that we're going to sell out of first. One of them is called A Vulnerable World, and it's written by someone right here in town, Acton Institute, and it's a good statistical analysis of the high price of human trafficking. That's one example. We also have a curriculum that we have carried, and once we're out of these, we'll be carrying different curriculum. This one is called Hands That Heal, and it comes with an international curriculum to train caregivers of trafficking survivors, and then it has booklets for the survivors themselves. And another one is this trilogy called The Princess. This was a New York bestseller, and it was on the New York bestseller list. It is an expose of life behind the veil. It is written by a princess of the royal house of Saudi Arabia. And she writes, she's not anti-Islam, she's anti the way women are treated. And back in the day, I used to make it required reading for people when we were setting them up in Islamic countries. If you want to understand what a woman goes through in Islam, and not everyone does, and she makes that very clear, but this is a princess. She tells in this first book through a ghostwriter what the story of her life is, how her girlfriend, who was interested in a boy that the family didn't approve of, was drowned in the family's swimming pool as an honor killing. And then after she wrote this, when the family found out that she had written it, and the horror that ensued, then she wrote the second book. her daughters, and it talks about what happened to her when they found out she had written this first book. And then the third book in the trilogy is Princess Sultana's Circle. If you only read one, you read the first one. You need to read them in order, but these were on the New York bestseller list for a very long time because they are incredibly written. And if you've ever wanted to get inside the mind of a woman in Islam, this is the way to do it. And you will find yourself giggling 1 minute and crying the next minute. When I used to make women read these, their husbands would call me and say, "What'd you do to my wife? She's sitting on the couch laughing and then crying and laughing and crying all weekend, and she won't put the book down and she won't cook dinner." And I'm like, "Then you get to cook dinner." So anyway, this is just a great way, and you will identify with her as a woman, even though you don't identify with her life. Her husband gives her $500,000 to go on a shopping spree on the weekend, and we can't identify with that. So but that's a true story. Then there's a trilogy of children's books and younger books, and they're actually novels: Stolen Child, Stolen Woman, Stolen Future. And so these are novels. Another book is some of other books that we carry that once were sold out of, we're not carrying them anymore, I can't reach them. Grab it. Daring to Hope, and this is the story of Kisses from Katie. And this was also on the bestseller list here, both of these books. My niece is actually working at this place in Uganda. If you ever wanted to read a book about female circumcision, the book Infidel, this is a woman who is still a Muslim, but she wrote this book and then her life was threatened. And it was also a New York bestseller. But if you want to understand that issue, this book goes into that very, very clearly. Another book, of course, is an all-time favorite, Francine Rivers' Redeeming Love. It's a novel that has stood the test of time. It's the story of Hosea. It's the story of God loving us even when we are unfaithful to him. And it's just an incredible love story, and written in a novel form, and represents the God that loves us unconditionally. Then we have the books that we carry for other reasons. Well, one more, Walking Pray. This is a book you would want to read if you were starting a safe house. It's story after story of women in a safe house, and it helps you understand the trauma-informed care that is necessary, because unintentionally we often re-victimize people when we ask their story, when we respond in ignorance. And so if you were starting a safe house, this would be a good book to read in order to understand. Ooh, look at this pile. Yum. Makes me want to go home and read. You know, sleep is great, but reading's better. And then we have some other ones that we carry on a regular basis. This is also a novel, and this is a book I recommend to parents. This is written to preteens. You find it in the preteen section of a bookstore, except bookstores are probably closed right now, I don't know. But we carry this book, and it's a novel story. A preteen could read it, in a short time. You could read it in an hour. I recommend you read it first. And then this is one of those tools that you can sit down with your children, your daughter, and have a conversation. If you go home and say, "Tonight we are going to discuss human trafficking," they're going to look at you like, "Mom, you're weird. Go away." But if you let them read this book and then you have a conversation about it, it's just, we need all the help we can get. It takes a village to raise a child. And we are your village. We are here for you to be a circle of protection, and this is one tool that you can use to have that conversation. Kind of like when moms and their daughters and dads and their daughters and sons come here and volunteer and talk about helping people who are attacked. And so this is a good book for you to read if you want to have a simple conversation with a preteen or a teen about trafficking. It's a story set in India, but it's a story that you can relate to and that you can share with your children. This is a true story written by Teresa Flores, who is a survivor of trafficking. This is a girl, upper middle class girl in Detroit, who needed a ride home from school. That's how it started. Her mother was late. She needed a ride. She took a ride with a guy with permission, and he gave her date rape, drug, raped her, and then trafficked her for 2 years. This book will give you an example. It's a perfect, true story of how does this happen in middle and upper middle class communities. Because human trafficking is no respecter of persons. It affects lower income, middle income, high income, all people, all children of any age group. And human trafficking is attacking and targeting children. We have been involved in the rescues of children as young as 6 days old, 6 weeks old, 1 month old, 6 months old. So no child is safe from the preying eye of the trafficker. And this book will give you a good example of how this would happen in a middle class or upper middle class community. A little girl who went to church. The last 3 girls we rescued all went to Sunday school, and one of their moms hunted at church for children that she could exploit. Another book, this is probably the best book I've ever read. It's an academic book, so it's expensive, but it's the best book I've ever read on trafficking. Each chapter is a separate study with documentation and statistics on what their findings are. And you can read, there are many, many books out there, and I've read books on medical, nursing, anti-trafficking, and only learned one new thing in that. And because I do training in all 50 states for medical professionals, I try and read anything and everything. But this book, I probably quote from this book more than anything. If you don't know human trafficking and you need to understand it inside and out, this is the book for you. And it is, each chapter stands alone, so you can read a chapter, put it down, and pick it up later. Probably the hardest book to read. The hardest book. And you know what? I deal with brokenness, exponential brokenness, and have for years. But this book took me a year to read. It's just so hard to read. It's called Oral Sex, The New Goodnight Kiss. And it talks about how that issue in youth culture today is not viewed as sex. And so into that issue in our youth culture today comes the slimy reach of the trafficker. In this book, there are stories of teenage girls, upper middle class, good homes, who wanted a $400 Prada bag, and they didn't want to work for it. So they recruit your 9-year-old to go to a party that they can't drive themselves home from. It's gut-wrenching. It's real. They're real stories, and it has a DVD in the back that interviews these girls, and it gives you how this happens in middle class, upper middle class, lower class, and regular schools, any youth environment. This book will show you how it happens very graphically, professionally, but it breaks your heart because these are quote unquote nice girls who recruit your child to go to something they can't get home from. A 14-year-old, Shauna Newell, is recruited to go to a sleepover in Pensacola, Florida, and sold on the internet for $300,000. That's the kind of thing that this book talks about. So that gives you a picture into youth culture and an attitude, an aspect of youth culture that has changed, that is being exploited by the trafficker. This book here is the only book so far that I've ever recommended for families, for children. It's called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. And the only thing I object to on here is it says porn proofing today's young kids. And I don't believe that you can porn proof or, completely danger proof a child ever. But you can give them knowledge, you can give them lifelines, and you can help them to understand. And this book does a really good job. It's very practical. So for example, the mom in the story sits down with the son and she's showing them pictures of the family at the beach in their swimming suits. A good picture is that, good memories. A bad picture is when there's no swimming suit. And so it's very practical. It goes into the chemistry of the brain brain, it talks about addiction, and it talks about how in our brain we have a feeling brain and a thinking brain. The feeling brain is what responds to intimacy, to a naked picture. And honestly, we were created to respond to that. There is nothing wrong with responding to that. If you are a faith-based person and you believe in God, you believe God created sex, that response at the base of our neck is actually instinct from the same place where we thirst when we're thirsty, we sweat when we're hot, and we shiver when we're cold. That response is actually healthy. When your child comes to you or you discover for the first time that they've looked at porn, do not shame them. That says they're healthy and normal. Tell them it's what you do with that that matters. If you have a faith-based background and you believe in the Bible, it says that Jesus was tempted in all points yet without sin. There's nothing wrong with temptation. Temptation is in itself not what's wrong. It's what you do with it. And this book talks like that. It's not a faith-based book, but I'm talking to you because I know some of you are coming from that perspective. And this is a difficult subject. And I want you to buy back the sacredness of how God created us. In here it talks about how the feeling brain, so when you hear the ice cream truck, as a child, your feeling brain goes, ooh, yum, I love ice cream. And you need your thinking brain to tell you, look both ways before you cross the street so you don't get hit by the garbage truck and don't get your ice cream. And so it's just very practical. But the problem is the feeling brain has a chemical that blocks the thinking brain, cortisol. And so it goes through some of the very practical things in here about stuff like that. In a way, a whole chapter on your thinking brain, how your thinking brain has to be in charge of your feeling brain, and how the two brains work together. And then the thing I like a lot about this, the best thing about this book, is at the end, the Father comes in. And the Father adds to the understanding. And it's not a book that makes men look stupid. It's not a book that makes men absent. It's a book where the family comes together. And unlike our society today, where honestly Hallmark, I think, makes men look dumb, and The Simpsons, dads are stupid. This book doesn't do that. It's full circle, where the family comes together and they are a circle of protection to their children. And so it's just very practical, very concrete for our children, and a good book to remember. Then there's the book Unreal, which you've heard me talk about before. This is my husband's book on the story of his life, and 2 chapters on the birth and growth of women at risk and the unreal stories that have happened to us. So when we were having some sensitivity readers read it, I had called them and they were reading it to their children. So fun stories about cobras and being chased by pirates and charged by rhinos. And the former U.S. ambassador, who I went to boarding school with, wrote on the front, endlessly fascinating, inspiring perspective on how one person can make a big difference in a complex and increasingly globalized world. So this is just a book about a family's journey in bringing worth and dignity, with 2 chapters on the birth and growth of women at risk. Those are some of the books that I've given you. These are journals, and these 2 are made from elephant poo. What does an elephant eat? Trees. What makes paper? Trees. And so people scoop it up, they clean it up, and it's called Ellie poo. And we will not be carrying these, and they're Michigan, and we love Michigan. Those of us in Michigan, you know, what other state in the world can you, in the nation, can you hold up a body part and go, we live here on this part? But these are elephant poo, great gift for the men in your life. I gave them to my grandsons. They got a good kick out of that. And then this journal too, another book that has a metal disc on the front that is hand done, and beautiful tie paper. So I just wanted to share those books with you because books are fun, and I want to thank you for joining us hit that like button and subscribe on YouTube, share the video on Facebook, and comment below that you shared it in order to be entered into this week's giveaway. This week's giveaway is a bookmark, a book thong. It's called, sticks in the crack and won't fall out. If you're my age or older, you don't know what a thong is, and you've missed nothing. But seriously, this is a bookmark that you can put in your book, and it doesn't. It fits right in the spine of your book. And it's made in our preventative program, and that's our giveaway. Beautiful bookmark from Thailand. So I care about learning. I don't believe that knowledge solves evil normally. I know I grew up in a medical family, and I know there are doctors who open up bodies and do surgery on them and see the effects of nicotine on the lungs. And then they go out and light up a cigarette. So knowledge does not necessarily translate into wisdom. But if ever there was advocacy and knowledge that matters, in this nation, we hate slavery. And these books will talk to you about how this century slavery is happening. And I do believe, I have watched and observed that as people's eyes are opened to the fact that the fastest growing arm of crime this century slavery is human trafficking, the sale of flesh against its will for either labor or sex. This is real, and it is the fastest growing crime in America, faster than guns and drugs. Imagine that. Hard to believe. And yet, guns and drugs, you sell it, you got to do it again, and you can get caught. Where if you sell a 100-pound child over and over and over and over, it's just good business. And so human trafficking is about money. And I believe advocacy and learning and knowledge is part of the key to undoing this evil in our land. And so as an organization, one of our goals is to open the eyes and reveal and remove the veil of ignorance on this issue. It is not just an international problem. I saw on the news 2 weeks ago, the director of the FBI said that in 2019, the FBI rescued 1,500 minors, children, he called them, in 2019, minors in America, American citizens with constitutional rights. Your daughter, my granddaughter, just in this land, the land of the free. And so advocacy is so important to me, and we love books, and I love to help you learn. And these books are filled with true stories and on many different risk issues. We deal with 15 different risk issue honor killings and female circumcision and orphans. These books cover many, many subjects. But I want you to know that we care about opening your eyes and helping you become that circle of protection to those you love. Because from our house to yours, this means war.